Welcome to another lecture on high temperature materials. Now, since the previous lecture was quite large and some of the inputs that were fed into the previous lecture might have been new to some of you, I just want to begin this lecture by restating some of the key points of the previous lecture. So, as an overview, what we saw as in the previous lecture was how a change in the temperature of a material would also change the state of the material. And in order to assess this change in state of the material, we used, based on our understanding of thermodynamics, we used a function called internal energy in order to assess this change in the state of the material when you rise the temperature. Now, even though thermodynamics fundamentally uses an understanding that when a material when a temperature of a material changes, there is a consequent change in the internal energy of the material. In order to quantify that, we moved away from our understanding based on the fundamental thermodynamics to a different area, and we tried to quantify how much of a change would a material experience in its internal energy when we increase the temperature of the material. So, based on our fundamental understanding of thermodynamics, we took a function, and this function gives us tells us there would be a change in state when you rise the temperature of the material, and based on this fundamental understanding, we then moved and quantified how much of a change a material would experience if you rise the temperature. Now, please allow me to just recap what are at least the fundamental points of the previous lecture, since it was, as I said earlier, it was a pretty long lecture. Now, the internal energy of the system in the previous lecture, we defined it as the summation of the internal energy of the components that are associated with the system. Supposing if the system is a material, it's a solid material, and it comprises of, say, n number of atoms, and these n number of atoms, each atom they have their own internal energy, and summation of all these internal energy would give us the internal energy of the system. So, this was our definition for the internal energy of the system. Now, the internal energy of the individual component, be it an atom or be it a molecule or be it an ion, the internal energy of the individual component, we saw it comprises of a potential energy term, which is dependent on its position, and the vector notation is because we need 3 coordinates, and also a kinetic energy term, and of each of these components. So, I is the component here. So, internal energy of the component I is the summation of its potential energy and kinetic energy. We defined the potential energy, or we derived the potential energy of the individual component is nothing but the summation of the potential energy because of its equilibrium position. So, in solids at least, each and every component has its equilibrium position, and because of this position there is a potential energy associated with it. This is because it interacts with other components or other atoms surrounding it. So, exclusively because of this equilibrium position we have an associated potential energy, and this is that potential energy. And now, when the system is not in its absolute zero temperature, it means it exhibits some vibration. It means the component of the system, it exhibits some vibration. It slightly wiggles away from its equilibrium position, and we also have to include the potential energy because of this movement into the potential energy of the component. Therefore, we formulated using Taylor expansion, and we were able to get an expression something like this, wherein the position of all the position pertaining to all the coordinate system were included, 1/2 kz square. So, this will primarily pertain to the equilibrium position of the atom, and this because of its vibration. Now, the kinetic energy of the component or the atom was fairly simple. It was half into mass. This was the expression that describes the kinetic energy of the component, rather in the x-axis, and in the y-axis we would define it something like this, and in the z-axis we would define something like this. So this is velocity, component of velocity in the z axis, component of velocity in the y axis, and the component of velocity in the x axis. So we have our description for potential energy of a component and the kinetic energy of the component. Now based on this, we could then derive at the arrive at the potential energy of the component I. Now we assumed that the vibration was harmonic at a particular temperature. The vibration of the atoms are harmonic in nature. Then that would mean we could use the law of equipartition. So please pardon my handwriting, but if you follow my voice, it is law of equipartition. So assuming that the vibration of the atoms are harmonic, we could arrive at this law. This means on an average, contribution of each of these components to the kinetic energy is equal to the contribution of each of these components to the potential energy. So that would mean, this positional contribution is equal, on an average, is equal to this kinetic energy, and we have this average term. So average energy contribution of an atom because of its vibration, and since we have assumed it is to be harmonic, we can approximate it using the law of equipartition. And now we have shown that when we try to derive an expression for this, now we use a probability of the vibration of an atom in that particular direction, and that will give us an expression wherein this average of each of this contribution would be half of Boltzmann constant and the temperature. So that would mean we have six such terms, and contribution of each of these terms on an average is this. So to the overall internal energy, as you can see here, we have such terms. There are 6 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, and on an average each of them contribute to this half of Boltzmann's constant and temperature. So ultimately the internal energy then would be Ui, then would be the equilibrium potential energy, which is based on the position of the equilibrium position of the atom, plus 6 into the contribution of individual vibration of the atom. So ultimately we have here 3 kappa T. Now when you change the temperature of a system, we can then quantify the change in the internal energy by 3 kappa delta T. This is the change in the temperature, and this is the change in the internal energy. This would cancel out when you do U2 minus U1, which is the internal energy of the new state minus the internal energy of the previous state. And since the equilibrium position would be the same for both of these states, then particularly we are this all is possible, or this expression is only valid for solid, because we have not considered other forms of kinetic energy. So particularly when your system is in solid, then your position will not be equilibrium position will not change. That would mean that when you take the difference in the internal energy, this will cancel out, and ultimately the change in the internal energy would thereby would entirely depend on change in the temperature of the material. So this is the key point that one should take away from the previous lecture. Even though the lecture was too long, this was the only point or the key point that I would want you to take away from the previous lecture. So let's begin with today's lecture, and this would rather be some sort of an extension of the previous lecture. Now in the previous lecture, what we basically saw was we have recapitulated here the change we quantified the change in the state of a system when you raise the temperature of the material. Now in this lecture, we want to relate the change in the state of the system. So change in the state of a system is purely a theoretical term. There are ways that this change in the state of the system is exhibited to us, and these ways are there are ways in which it has been we observe this change in state of the system, and this visible change in the state of the system are quantified in a rather using a different factor than the internal energy. So internal energy, it's a function that shows or that indicates a change in the state of the system. But if there is a physical change in the state of the system, we go to another factor in order to show why such change in the why such change happens, or what is the theoretical factors that governs that change. So when you rise the temperature of a material, supposing you observe beyond its melting point, the material as the material which once was solid now has melted and has become a liquid. So this is also a change in the state of the material, but the internal energy that we derived so far will not be valid, because as it is shown here, this expression for the internal energy is purely for solids. And now when you see a visible change in the state of the system, we need to go for a different thermodynamic parameter. Now let me pose a question to you. One of the transformation, or one of the phenomena that we are very much familiar with, is the phase transformation. And even one could argue that melting is also a phase transformation, because when you talk about a unary phase diagram, the phase diagram of one component, then it comprises of the solid, liquid and gas phases, and that would mean that liquid is also a phase, the phase that we have ourselves defined in a different manner. As a metallurgical engineer, we have a definite description for phase, and in that phase also include liquids. So melting is also a phase transformation. But apart from that, if you consider a phase transformation of ferrite, so let us talk about the phase transformation of ferrite to austenite. What would you call, or what would you say drives this transformation? The easy answer is, or the textbook answer is, there is a change in the free energy. So system wants to go to the lowest form of free energy. So so the system changes its phase, thereby it can reduce its free energy. So that is why that is the theoretical underpinning of this phase transformation. That would be a textbook answer. To get into what actually happens, or what governs this free energy, or to make it more simple, one could argue that when you raise the temperature of the material, what happens is that the equilibrium position of the material changes. At one temperature, the material continued to be equilibrium position, and when you raise the temperature of the material, this equilibrium position changed, and the material moved from one equilibrium position to another equilibrium position, and this is what causes the change in the phases, or this is what causes or drives the phase transformation. This is an expression that does not include any new terms like free energy. It does not include any description of thermodynamic parameters. It just states that if you leave a material at a particular temperature, it will continue to be in that state. And now, say for example, if you leave the ferrite at a particular temperature, it will continue to be ferrite for however long you want. But when you change the temperature, and when the rise in temperature facilitates a new equilibrium position, then from that equilibrium position of ferrite, it moves to a new equilibrium position, and that causes a phase transformation, and that is where the ferrite transforms to austenite. So this description is purely based on the change in the equilibrium position, which is facilitated by the temperature that we feed in. Now let us see what is the factor that is used to show or to define this change in the equilibrium position, or this shift in the equilibrium position, or this transformation. And this factor you might all be familiar with. It's referred to as entropy. Now in this lecture, we will try to understand or try to relate entropy and temperature, how this entropy or this change in the entropy or is affected when we rise the temperature of the material. So now let us just see what the concept of entropy is first. We will try to define this concept of entropy, and then based on that we will try to establish a relation between this entropy and, or particularly the change in entropy and the temperature. So supposing you have a cusp sort of an arrangement here, and you have a ball here, and now this ball remains to be at this lowest position, how much ever long you want it to be, and it will be there for a very long time unless otherwise you disturb it with an external force. And when you disturb it with an external force, you move the ball from here, and you give the force in such a way that it is able to overcome this little barrier and move this. If your external force is sufficient enough to overcome this barrier, the ball would then move from here, and it will roll down and will reach a position here, and it will reach this position, and it will stay there for unless otherwise you disturb it. That will stay there till kingdom come. So we have now changed the equilibrium position of this ball by imposing an external force. Now initially the equilibrium position was 1, and now we have changed it to 2. Now one has to again apply some amount of external force in order to make this ball go from 2 to 1. Like we applied an external force in order to make this ball to move from 1 to 2, we have to apply some amount of external force in order to change this 2 to 1. It will not automatically change to 2 to 1 unless otherwise you apply an external force. This means that this transformation from 1 to 2 because of an external force is irreversible in nature. Meaning, when you apply an external force and the ball moves from position 1 to 2, it will stay there in 2 unless otherwise you apply an additional external force. It will stay there continuously, and unless otherwise you want to change this position, if you want to change this position, you have to apply an external force. So that would mean that the change in the position of this ball from 1 to 2 is irreversible in nature. Now, similar to this, the simple thought experiment of the position of the ball, we can we can just extrapolate this to our understanding of phase transformation. So you can assume that this is the energy state of ferrite, and assume that this is the energy state of austenite, either alpha and gamma to be more technical. So this is the energy state of ferrite, and this is the energy state of austenite, and now you increase the temperature. Now the system or the ferrite has transformed itself to austenite. Now one has to then define how much of a change as the system experienced when the external force is applied to it. Again, let me reiterate, how much of a change the system has experienced, how much far away as it moved from its initial equilibrium position. When you apply an external force, one has to quantify that. We need a function to quantify that. You have an initial position, you apply an external load or external force, and that force causes this material to move from position 1 to position 2, which is its new equilibrium, and we want to quantify how much of a change has taken place. We want to quantify that, and we want to introduce a function to quantify that, and that function is called as entropy. And generally we represent entropy by the letter S. So what the letter S tells us is how much of a change has happened because of your introduction of the external force or because of the interaction with the external agency. It quantifies how much of a change has happened, and when we talk about irreversibility, because we have seen that this change in the position is irreversible. When we talk about in those terms, this entropy tells us the degree of irreversibility. So we have defined the entropy as a function that would tell us how much away from an equilibrium position a system has moved when you apply or when an external agency is allowed to interact with it. And when we talk about the same entropy in terms of irreversibility, then entropy defines the degree of irreversibility. Now, in most cases, or particularly in the case we are interested in, the external force that allows us to change the temperature, in high temperature material, a factor that often changes is the temperature. The external force that allows us to change the temperature is the amount of heat that is fed into the material. So we have the that means that the entropy is proportional to the amount of heat, or the change in the entropy is proportional to the amount of heat that is fed into the material. The more heat that you feed into the material, you could then expect, or more external force that you give into the material, you could expect a more change in the state of the material, or you could expect a more change from its equilibrium position. Now we are talking about degree of irreversibility. That means we need to know, we need to have a reference point, and from that reference point we need to see its change. Only then we could talk about the degree of irreversibility. So in order to have that reference point, we assume that the reference point to be temperature. So if you have a system at a particular temperature, that would be the reference point, and then you include or allow the heat to interact with the material. We have a material at a particular temperature, that is a reference point. We allow heat to interact with that material, and any change that we associate with that, any change in the irreversibility, we then quantify it using entropy. So the expression for entropy would then be Q by T. So T here would be the reference point that would allow us to understand the degree of irreversibility, and Q here is the external agency. I hope, even though these concepts you would have already been familiar with, but I just wanted to introduce you I want to reintroduce you to this concept in the context of temperature, because from what I have seen in the term books of thermodynamics or introduction to that, when they talk about entropy, it is rather subjectively spoken in relation to an heat engine. I just wanted to give a description that is more that we can relate in the course of high temperature material, and that is why I have spent some time on introducing, or rather reintroducing, the change in the entropy. So we have now an expression for this change in the entropy, which is nothing but the ratio of the external agency that, or the heat that is fed into the system, to the temperature that acts as the reference point. So this is now the expression for the degree of change or degree of irreversibility at a particular temperature T. Now in high temperature materials, we usually compare the changes in the ambient temperature, let's just say T1, to the changes in the high temperature, let's just say T2. So the high temperature is relatively much higher than the ambient temperature. So this is the conditions that we are interested in. We want to compare a particular factor at an ambient temperature to a particular factor at high temperature. Now let us do the same for change in the entropy or the degree of irreversibility. So this change in entropy, say delta S1, now for a low temperature would be Q by T1, and this change in entropy for high temperature delta S2 will be equal to Q by T2. And now because of this condition, it means that this is smaller than this, and since it is in the denominator part, that would mean the delta S1 is greater than delta S2 when Q is constant. So are you able to grasp this? If not, maybe allow me to reiterate. When the Q is constant, and we want to, in accordance with our study on high temperature material, we want to compare a change in a particular parameter at high temperature with that of the ambient or room temperature. We want to study that, so we express our description for change in the entropy using room temperature and high temperature, and we let the amount of heat that passes through the system or that gets into the system to be constant. And if you do that, we see at high temperature the change in the entropy for a given heat input is less than the change in the entropy at low temperature for the same given input or heat input. So this is one of the relation I want you to take away from this lecture. That is, when you compare the change in the entropy at high temperature and at room temperature for a particular heat input, at room temperature the change in the entropy will be higher than at high temperature, and this is because of this relation. Now let us just write an expression for a small change in the entropy. So forget about two different temperatures. Let us just write a generalized expression for a small change in entropy. This would mean a small heat input to the reference temperature, that is T. The small heat input we use delta, and this is because again the heat input is a path function rather, and the entropy is a state function. Now one can look into why this entropy is a state function while the heat is not. You can, of course, you might already be knowing it. If not, you can have a look at some introductory books on thermodynamics to get an understanding of it. But this is not, since this is not that much of a relevance to our course, we won't be getting much deeper into it. Now this is the new expression for, or this is an expression for a small change in the entropy and in relation to the heat input and the reference temperature. Now we have seen a thermodynamic description for change in the internal energy in the last class. So this can be described as dU, which is a small change in the internal energy, which is nothing but the difference in the heat input, a small amount of the heat input that goes into the system, minus a small amount of work that is done by the system. So this is the expression for a change in the internal energy of the system when there is heat input involved and work involved. So this is the expression for it. And now, since we have a new description for we now have ways to express this heat input in terms of entropy, we can write the change in the internal energy as T ds minus a small change in the work. And now assuming that the work involves change in volume, the change in the internal energy can be written as PdV. So PdV is your pressure and V is your volume, and T is the temperature, and ds is the change in the entropy, and du is the change in the internal energy of the system. Now we saw that based on the description of internal energy, we saw that for depending on the temperature of the system, if the system is in high, if a system is in high temperature, it would mean that for a given amount of heat, the change in the entropy is rather low when you compare it with the same change at low temperature. So this is what our first understanding was in the in moments before we had this, we were able to arrive at this understanding. Now we will see if similar tendency is exhibited by internal energy, meaning we give the same heat input to the system, and now the initial state of the system is different. One system is in a lower temperature and the other system is in high temperature, but we give the same heat input, and we want to know if the change in the internal energy of the system is dependent on its condition. We want to know, like entropy, if the system is in higher temperature, the change in the entropy would be lower, or if internal energy would exhibit similar properties. We want to know that. And if you have a closer look at this expression of the entropy, we would see that whatever little change that happens in the entropy because of its high temperature, it is compensated by the inclusion of the temperature term here. Meaning, we know, or we have shown that at high temperature, the change in the entropy because of the high temperature is lower. And if we don't have this term here, if you don't have this T term here, that would mean that the change in the internal energy would also be lower at high temperature. But since we have this T here, this T compensates for any influence of temperature on the internal energy. Let me make it even more clear. We saw that at high temperature, for a given amount of heat, the change in the entropy is lower. And if this is the only factor that governs the internal energy, or change in the internal energy means, then at high temperature, the change in the internal energy for an amount of heat input will be lower when you compare that to that of the low temperature. But since there is this temperature included here, that would mean that any change or any effect of temperature in the degree of change in the entropy will be compensated by this term. So that means that even though the state of the system or the state of the system or the temperature of the system affects the change in the entropy for a given heat condition or given heat input, it will not have that effect in the change of the internal energy, because we have the T term here. Since we have this T term here, it would mean that any diminishing in the change of entropy because of the high temperature will be compensated by this T term here. So this is one of the difference between entropy and the internal energy. In the internal energy, irrespective of its state, be it high temperature, be it low temperature, the change in the internal energy for a given heat input will always be the same. But for entropy, the change in the entropy for a given heat input depends on that particular temperature or the characteristic temperature of the system. This is the other key point that I want you to take away from this lecture. So based on the temperature, now we are able to distinguish entropy and internal energy. So instead of making this lecture even more larger, I will stop this and I will continue this from where I left now as a second part. So let's see ourselves in the second part, wherein we will continue from this.